Hey, welcome to episode 167 of Awkwardly Awesome Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Freeman. If you're anything like me, sometimes you worry about the future and think, oh, what if this thing happens that won't feel that good, or what if this thing happens that could be bad. I've done that a lot in my life, but what happens when we go to the doctor and the news actually really isn't good? What happens then? I have a guest today who has a powerful perspective on this question and so many other things. And I'm excited to tell you more about him. Nope. To tell you more about him, but first this.
Today's guest, Eivind Oland.
Hey, welcome back. Let me tell you about my guest, Eivind. Eivind has created a great life for himself and his family. I met him a few months ago at a Halloween party. He and his wife were dressed as super kindness heroes. Since then, every time I talk with him, I'm in awe of the choices he's made and his perspective on life. He and his wife have three children. And Eivind has excelled at connecting customers with commercial insurance packages for over 4 decades. 5 years ago, at age 62, the challenge of having prostate cancer suddenly came into his awareness. Eivind not only accepted this challenge and undertaken the treatment routine, he has also found resources and cultivated an empowering perspective. However, he didn't stop there. Now he's helping others navigate their cancer journeys. Please welcome Eivind to Awkwardly Awesome Podcast. Well, welcome, my friend.
Thank you, Jason. I am just tickled to death to be number 167. And I've watched many of your podcasts. Your folks are truly inspiring, as are you. And I'm thrilled to be able to share any perspectives that might help others today.
Thanks so much for being here. I'm excited to learn so many things from you. But first, I love to start my guests off early in life. When you were 7, if I had asked you, Eivind, first of all, do you pronounce the D in your name, or?
Yes, we try to. It's pronounced many different ways, obviously, but it's an old Norwegian name, and it's Eivind. Yes.
Good. If I had asked you at age 7, Eivind, what do you think you want to be when you grow up? What would you have said?
Well, Jason, I think I probably would have said a carpenter, which is one of the hobbies that I have today. And I do a lot of woodworking. I've worked on several homes that we've owned. My dad was a carpenter, and I admired what he did. And it was always fun getting out in the garage and seeing him do interesting things with old-fashioned hand tools. Now today we cheat, but I think on Saturday mornings occasionally I'd go to breakfast with he and his buddies, and another one of the guys was a carpenter, and I think that's truly what I wanted to be.
Did your dad have any power tools in his garage? Or?
Well, back then they had, we always had a table saw, and Dad had drills and a circular saw. But gosh, other than that, it was mostly done by hand. Dad could nail upside down 15 different angles with a hammer and a nail, and he would teach you the wrist action and elbow, where the elbow should go. And they just didn't rely on many power tools. So I admire them for that.
My grandpa was a carpenter, and I just know enough about carpentry to know it takes a lot of talent to do it well.
It does. It takes a lot of patience. Sometimes I do certain kinds of projects, but some of the old fine joinery and things that they used to do on their own, I don't have the patience for. So we have jigs and tools that help us cut corners and get around not having quite that much patience.
I hadn't planned to go here right away, but since you brought up carpentry, how did you come to think, oh, I'm going to make a bear with a chainsaw?
Well, that's right. I told you about my bear up at the lake that my first chainsaw project that I've been working on. You might laugh a little bit when you see the pictures, but
I saw them. It actually looks really good.
Thank you. I see guys that put those together in 45 minutes and 2 hours, and they've done 1,000 of them. This is my first one. So I've got quite a few hours in this already. I love being up at the lake. There's an abundance of wood and big logs, and so far I want to make a bear, a fish, an eagle, and I'm not sure where I'm going to go from there. Kind of like art class in high school or in junior high school when everything ended up being a soap dish. I mean, maybe they're not going to be as large as I imagined once I get them all whittled down, but it's good therapy. I'm having fun. I have artistic children. I struggle a bit in being sort of creative and artistic. I like to, copy people that are doing things on YouTube, and that's kind of where I start. But I'm enjoying it.
But how did the idea come into your head? Oh, today I'm going to start on a bear with a chainsaw.
Well, I think I drove by a place up at the lake in northern Minnesota, and this guy has so many unique carvings. And some of the things I've done in the woodworking shop and in the last several years maybe gave me the feeling that I could do some of that too. And it was time to, I was heading back to our cabin, and I've got a couple chainsaws and some other tools there. So, and there's a lot of wood. So I just decided it's time to try.
Well, inspiring. So, I need to ask you, where did you grow up?
Well, I spent my first 8 years in Hibbing, Minnesota. I was born in Williston, North Dakota, way out west.
My gosh.
Yeah, by 6 months, we were living back in Hibbing, Minnesota. My dad was a policeman in Williston, but he was a carpenter by trade, and it was a better way to support the family. And so we moved back to the Iron Range in Minnesota. Spent my first 8 years there till my wife lured me over to Fargo Moorhead area to a little town called Dilworth, Minnesota, where I ended up in second grade with her. And just kidding. And yeah, we were in, second grade together, but Interesting growing up on the Iron Range in northern Minnesota. Quite a metamorphosis of the process of mining and digging up all that earth and all the reclamation now that's been done. Going back, seeing how beautiful the Iron Range is, how rugged it is, and really how independent the people are up there. So we do enjoy it up there.
There's nuggets all over the place here. So you just casually mentioned that you met your wife in second grade. Not many people can say that. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, we just, let's see, December 3rd was the 52nd anniversary of our first date. We went dated for 7 years during a couple of years in high school and college. And I guess we couldn't shake each other. So January 13th will be 45 years of marriage. So we both grew up in a small town in, just outside of Fargo-Moorhead on the Minnesota side. Go Vikings. I went to college in Fargo-Moorhead. At one college, she went to college at another college in Fargo-Moorhead. So yeah, we've enjoyed a lot of great years together and share a lot of great experiences, that go way back.
What's the secret? I mean, people sometimes struggle to maintain friendships. What's the secret of creating first a friendship and then dating for over 50 years and then creating a vibrant marriage?
I don't know the secret. Sharice and I are different in many ways, but we are, I guess, codependent. We respect each other. We share in the decision making. We're both a little bit controlling in our own ways, but we seem to balance it out. And certainly we have a love for, family and, I guess it's give and take. I always, when we were working with pre-marriage couples in the Catholic Church way back, it was love is a decision every day. And, sometimes that decision's easy and sometimes it's not very easy. But we have been fortunate enough and blessed to have made many of the right decisions. And we certainly enjoy each other or each other's company.
What advice would you give to a young couple who suddenly it's been going blissful and they suddenly find themselves in a not so easy time?
Well, obviously faith is important. Talking about things, communicating things very thoroughly. We always in our early marriage said that we're not going to go to bed mad or angry or upset. We're going to work things out. I think we did a pretty good job of that. We might be getting a little more stubborn in our old age. We might not abide by the rules as much as we should. But yeah, I think communication and or gaining a perspective from somebody else, whether it be a counselor, a therapist, priest or pastor, or family or friends. But, certainly communication is really the key.
Communication is the key. Powerful. And it's kind of easy to say, but the day-to-day of it can be challenging.
Yeah. Sacrificing for each other, obviously is critical. Just like you sacrifice for your children, for your families, working through in-law issues, other family things. Everybody has challenges. But yeah, you're right. Communication and being able to trade and share and take turns and not always get it the way you want it. Sharing hobbies and like commonalities, I guess, things you like to do together, I think are really important. Friends that you can have together, as opposed to one spouse having their own friends, another spouse having their own friends, and never meeting in the middle. But I think over the years, share most of the couples friends that we have in our lives.
What have you enjoyed about being a father?
Well, I like to hope that I would think that our kids would consider me a pretty decent father. I think being a total dork many years has been fun, especially with my boys. My daughter has a good sense of humor as well, but with my boys, I humbled them and taught them humility many times during the course of their growing up, whether it was wearing Billy Bob teeth to a public place, or really nerdy glasses, or just doing something really dorky. They still talk about all the times I've embarrassed them in their lives. And I said, well, that's for all the times you pounded your fist or your feet in the stores when you were 2 years old, or hid under the clothing racks where we couldn't find you, things like that. But I mean, that's a fun part of being a father, communicating them and helping them through their times of trials and tribulations and different growing pains, and getting up when they come in late at night and going and talking about their friends, their feelings, their emotions. I think is important. Empowering them. I think it's been fun empowering our kids to be adventurous, travel the world, try new things, experiment, do some of the things they've done in their lives. I think that's fun. I think it's actually fun too, being a role model, being a good role model, and as far as ethics, integrity are involved, and just being involved, whether it be as their coach, as a spectator, just being present and involved in the things they've been involved in, Cub Scouts, anything. We've really enjoyed our kids, and we're really enjoying our grandkids now, that we live back here and we live close to them, very close to them. And it's just a blessing.
Well, so how did you go from wanting to be a carpenter to being in insurance?
Well, interesting. I went to college, and my plan was to be a physical education teacher. I wanted to teach FIAD, and I wanted to teach grades K through 8. I wanted to help kids when they were developing, and as they changed and developed. Not all the natural athletes that come through the schools, but the kids that didn't know their left foot from the right foot.
So you wanted to help me?
Yeah, I want to help all kids, really. And I didn't see that happening. I saw the richer getting richer, the poor getting poorer, in elementary, junior high, even up through senior high in the high school I grew up in and attended. And athletics, the sports were number one in all, throughout the school year. I loved working with kids, and I actually started teaching, and then we moved, and my next teaching job offer was for $8,500 a year for teaching and then coaching 3 seasons of sports, K through 8, kindergarten through 8, which is exactly what I wanted. but I didn't know that I could risk trying to raise a family if something happened to my partner, Cherise, who was working, if something happened on that salary. And so I had my suit on, I walked down the street, I walked in the front door of a nationwide insurance company. And 2 days later, they made me an insurance underwriter for about twice that salary. So that was my transition from, a teaching opportunity to starting as insurance underwriter, and ultimately in 90% of my career has been in insurance sales.
So you literally were in one office talking about teaching with your suit on, and you're like, since I'm all dressed up, I might as well walk down the street.
That's exactly it. From the school to the home office of Federated Mutual Insurance Company in Owatonna, Minnesota, it was less than a half a mile. And it just so happened my godfather in northern Minnesota had been a successful salesperson for that company for 30 years. And I walked in the front door, introduced myself to the receptionist, introduced myself to the HR person, dropped a name, and lo and behold, we went in and he interviewed me. And it was kind of interesting, Jason, because he had a different technique. He didn't ask me hardly anything about my college background, what courses I took, what I liked. Well, I shouldn't say that, because immediately we got into a conversation about carpentry. And he
What?
and he said, well, I'm putting new cupboards in my house right now. And he said, I've been talking to a contractor, and he says I can do this. He said, what do you think? And the next thing you knew, we went in and for an hour talked about his kitchen, and the next day I was hired.
It's interesting how sometimes when we think about life, we think about planning everything out and
Yeah.
getting the future all set on paper. But then sometimes you just walk down the street, have an hour-long conversation about carpentry, and then you step into a 40-plus year career.
Not
That's
many things,
amazing.
not many things in life are perfectly linear, and you just got to go with the flow. So I'm blessed.
And then you went to second grade, and you met your future wife.
Well, I'm not sure she liked me until about 10th grade, Jason, because that's when finally the sparks flew a little bit. So we didn't hardly know each other, even though it was a small school. We just ran in different circles. So yeah, we're just fortunate the way things work out sometimes.
And then sometimes there's just plainly challenging things in life. Like, what was it like 5 years ago getting a diagnosis? First of all, how do you know to go in?
Well, my father had prostate cancer, and back in 25 years ago, and I walked with him through some of that journey. I wish he would have shared more of his journey. We lived 8 hours away, so I didn't see him throughout all of the dealings that he had, but I understood prostate cancer to a point. I knew that we had to watch our PSA scores, and I would do my PSA score, every few years.
What does PSA stand for?
Good question. Sorry. PSA is a prostate specific antigen. And the more of that, the antigen that is present in your blood, the higher risk you have of having cancer in your prostate gland and or other places. But basically it begins as prostate cancer. And so, I knew that that was an important score to watch, being, my dad had gone through that. And so I was doing that in my 50s. And then when I did a general physical exam, they took a score, and my primary care physician in Wisconsin at the time called me up and said, "Hey, your score bumped up a little bit from 4.2 to 6.4. I'd like to have you meet with a urologist." And so I went and met with a urologist. And
First of all, what was that call like when he called you and said your score's higher than?
I don't think I had any real emotional feeling about that. I didn't have any worry or concern at the time. And I guess that's a little bit because that's the kind of person I am. You just kind of take things as they come. There's not much you can do about it. So anyway, I had no anxiety or reservations about meeting the urologist.
So then when did you get or how did you get the diagnosis?
So I met with a urologist in Wisconsin, and he was within the health system that my wife was administrator in, and he was very well respected. So he performed a biopsy, a digital rectal exam, with biopsy, felt a lump or callus or a rough spot on the back of where my prostate gland would be. Said, I think we need to get this checked out. They proceeded with a needle biopsy where they shoot 12 needles, into your prostate gland.
Did you say 12?
Yes.
12?
12.
Wow.
And it's kind of an interesting experience. I didn't find it terribly painful, but I think some men, certainly that I've talked to, don't find it very comfortable. And, there are different ways to do that, to guide those needles, to take those core samples that I've learned since that time. Nonetheless, they took the core samples, came back with a reading that was essentially stage 4, or what they called aggressive prostate cancer. And then it was an issue of dealing with, yes, I have prostate cancer. How does prostate cancer rank up in the global picture of all other cancers? It's certainly easier to manage slower growing. 1 out of 7 men find out while they're alive that they have prostate cancer. It is something that's certainly not as life-threatening as other cancers. And so I understood that. I kind of knew that. But yeah, when he first tells you that you have cancer, it's scary. It's the big C. It's the word everybody dreads. But Sharice was with me during the visit. I guess I don't think I got very shook up. I certainly trusted his expertise and his knowledge, and I felt I was in good hands.
So what was your next step?
Well, the next step, and I had to do it over again, I certainly would have done differently. But it was interesting. It was sort of like, well, we have these 2 ways to deal with prostate cancer. We can do radiation therapy, or we can do a prostatectomy, or surgically remove your prostate gland. And had a brief discussion about some of the pros and cons. And he gave me information to take home and look at, brochures, and then said, let me know if you want to do robotic surgery, which is a prostatectomy or removal, because we have an opening next Thursday, December 28th, 5 years ago yesterday, for surgery. And I, thought about it a little bit. I said, let's do it. had I had I
So in a week.
it was about a week or so, yeah, I think, and it came up real fast, and so I just figured that was probably the best thing to do. Again, had I had to do it over, now that I know what I know and have been involved in support groups and much more education, like I normally would recommend to most men, if somebody approached me now and said, "Hey, I've just diagnosed," I would say, "Hey, take 90 days, do the research, go meet with a radiation oncologist, go meet with a medical oncologist, and again, if you want a second opinion from a different urologist, go ahead. Go where they do, 500 of these a year, not 50 of these a year. I mean, check their credentials, do this, do that. And it's not to say I would have ended up any different, or it's not to say I doubted the proficiency or the talent or the skill of the surgeon there. But I think, typically if you go through and you visit with support groups, now we have gentlemen who come into our support group every month and say, "I was just diagnosed. What should I do? What are your thoughts? How did it work out for you?" And all the men will share without trying to influence and that person. And, I would say take 90 days. There's nothing life-threatening here. The best thing you could do is take the time to educate yourself and feel comfortable with the decision you make. It's your decision. Be your own advocate. My father was just the opposite example. The guy said, "Okay, you should do a prostatectomy." And he said, "Okay." And I drove up to Fargo. It was a stormy Sunday. I did my research here at the Cancer Center in Sioux Falls. I drove up to Fargo, and because there was such a winter storm, everybody canceled their appointments. The next morning, I said to my mother, "Mom, I'm going in to meet Dad's urologist." And I asked him, I said, "So you want to perform a radical prostatectomy on my father," which certainly radical prostatectomy means he could end up with impotence and incontinence because of the two nerves involved on either side of the prostate gland. And I said, how many nerve sparing prostatectomies have you performed? He said, 4 or 5. I said, "What do you mean 4 or 5? "Well, I assisted in one," he said. "Okay." I said, "Where did you learn the procedure, the surgical procedure? Where did you gain the skill?" And he said, "From a young man who did his fellowship out east and just came here in the last couple of years." And so the loaded question, my last question to him was, "So of those 4 or 5 patients that you've performed surgery on, how are they doing today? What kind of effects are they dealing with?" And he turned his back on me, refused to speak to me, sat down at his desk, and he would not look at me or talk to me. And so I guess that's the end of our conversation, and got up and left the room. But again, my father was just going to follow this guy blindly. Certainly we have better, our arms around and a better handle on prostate cancer today and better techniques and so forth. But, you really have to be your own advocate, do your own research, and make your own decision.
There's some temptation, I think, when people get really sick, to just trust the doctors and go with the flow. Why might not following that instinct be the best thing to do?
Well, again, like I've told many people, urologists, I feel for urologists, in that there are a lot of issues within the whole field of urology. There's being a good surgeon. There's staying up on all of the things having to do with the plumbing, the man parts, things like that. There are things to do with cancer. There's so many other things besides just prostate cancer. And it's very difficult. And I think most of them would admit it's very difficult. And the field is changing so fast with the different scans, the different research, the different treatment methods and so forth and protocol that I think most of them would admit they're not up on all of that. I would look for a center of excellence, which there are many of in the United States, for prostate cancer and not just general urological care issues. And so I think there's a certain part of that applies to a lot of different illnesses, issues. You really need to find out specifically who is best in the field that most specifically aligns with your need or your affliction, and seek that out within, obviously there might be insurance stipulations or parameters and so forth. But I think, do your very best to find somebody who's not only good at what you need, but they have done lots of that, or have had hundreds or thousands of patients that they've helped, and that they can tell you how those people are doing. I know that there are some that do a wonderful job, but how many people pay attention to what goes on after you leave their clinic or their operating room? I think the mark of a good practitioner is that they truly care about the outcomes and the results and have some understanding of what has become of their work.
So what would you tell a man who's just been diagnosed with prostate cancer, aside from being patient and taking a time to make a decision?
Well, I think, as I mentioned, make sure you cover all of the disciplines, the 3 different specialists within that field, because keep in mind, Jason, surgeons are reimbursed, paid essentially to do surgery. Radiation oncologists are paid to do radiation. I mean, everybody has a little bit of a vested interest in their discipline, at their, or if you want to call it that, their special area. The gold standard is a urologist or a medical oncologist or a radiation oncologist that has a patient come in, and after the diagnosis says, I would recommend you go see these 2 other individuals or go to this cancer center. I helped a gentleman who lives in Seattle, Washington, actually, who called me and said, "Hey, Eivind, I'm crushed. I've had this, diagnosis, and his urologist was going to retire in 4 days." And so he said, "What should I do?" And I said, "Well, go to the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Center right there in Seattle, do this, do that." And he actually saw the gold standard, work. I mean, his urologist said, "I'm retiring in 4 days." So, visit with the new urologist coming on board, go to Fred Hutchinson, go to the cancer center, do this, this, and this. And when it all came was said and done, he made a decision he was very comfortable with, and he's doing very well today. And that was about 1.5 years ago. So I guess that's what I would advise. And then seek out support groups. There are support groups. There are many different prostate cancer foundations or groups in the United States. I am now on the national board of the state prostate cancer coalitions. It's called the National Alliance. And because we lack a good source for education, awareness, navigation help in South Dakota, specifically, I'm starting a new chapter or coalition in South Dakota, so we can have support group meetings, so we can share and distribute information and expertise or experiences, so that we can have awareness events for men to come out and maybe have their PSA, their blood drawn, and do a PSA test. So we're just beginning that. I was in DC in October at the national meeting, and I'm pretty excited about that.
So as a PSA test something that's in a usual panel that men get doing the checkups, or do you have to ask special?
You have to ask specially. I think if you're beyond age 55, you're normally, when you go in to do a physical, they will try to do a PSA test. And keep in mind, PSA doesn't mean everything. I mean, there are once you get into it like I did, I mean, then you have scans and tests and PET CT scans and very, very, very highly specialized tests using different radioactive isotopes and so forth to find these cancer cells. And so, PSA isn't the only way to gauge. There are ways, men who ride bikes, heavy bike riders, and men who, if you've just engaged in sexual activities within 48 hours before taking a test. I mean, there are things that can skew PSA tests. So, but that's usually the start. If there's an indication that your PSA jumps, it's a good time to go further and check in.
How much is a prostate cancer is genetic versus people just randomly getting it, I guess?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question. Nowadays, genetic and genomic testing is so absolutely critical for so many things. Even though my grandfather on my mother's side had prostate cancer well before you ever even heard of this, and I didn't find out till about 3 years ago, reading an old diary of my grandmother's. And my father had prostate cancer, I think it was 1999. My genetic testing said that my prostate cancer had nothing to do with that. That was not genetic. And then there are genomic testing. So genomic testing, they might take the cancerous cells, the prostate gland itself, and the cryo frozen slices, and then they can do genomic testing to see more about how to treat me or what treatment methods might be significantly better in their success rate. It would also, there's certain testing that would allow me to know whether my daughter had a propensity for maybe having breast cancer, my sons. I do think it's important that you involve the genetic and genomic testing, in your care plan when you can.
So back to support groups. Men stereotypically at least don't have more of a struggle asking for help, asking for support, and I can see a man who's newly diagnosed saying, I can just muscle through this. I don't need a support group. What would you say to what are the benefits of having a support group?
Well, I think first of all, I have found out, like for instance, I know I will be dealing with this for the rest of my life. It's not something that's going to be instantly gone or cured. Some men have the benefit of having surgery or radiation, and it eliminates cancer cells. There are millions of cancer cells potentially in the size of a drop of water or a pencil eraser. I mean, and of those cancer cells, if you've had them at one time, been diagnosed, there's a chance that they're going to work their way back into a spot to get attention again. And so for me, I guess I'm dealing with this like a chronic condition. I mean, it's something I will deal with the rest of my life. And so some men think, well, gosh, okay, I had my prostatectomy or I had my radiation, and my PSA is undetectable. I don't have a need to go on and, visit with support groups. I think that's really unfortunately an attitude a lot of men have. But I would disagree with that because so many men have come into the two support groups out of the Twin Cities I've been involved in, and have said, gosh, I never knew the first couple of years what was going to happen in the third year. And my incontinence is getting way worse. I think I have some other urological or plumbing problems that, with my man parts that have to be fixed in other ways. My erectile dysfunction is just ruining our relationship and our marriage. And, I need that wasn't presented to me in the first 6 months as potentially being a problem. Or for instance, I was in my third or fourth year by the time my metastases in my bones in my lymph system really started showing up. My PSA was doubling every 2 months, which is absolutely scary. And we tried different scans with different isotopes and couldn't find them. It couldn't light up. And so, 10 to 15% of men, even with the most high-tech scans, you can't find those little buggers. So you have to keep trying other methods. So I think, you may not feel like you need a support group at first. But even some of the androgen deprivation therapy, or what we call hormone suppressor or testosterone suppressing therapies, they cause depression, anxiety, bone issues, and men find those really troubling over time, and are lifestyle issues that are impacted by your medications. So you might be taking a medication that's suppressing the cancer cells that you have, and your PSA score is staying down, but now you have cognition issues, or now you have loss of energy, and you have zero libido, and you have these other things. Sometimes those develop over time. So I think by getting involved in a support group right away, you can sort of head some of those off at the pass, or make decisions on how am I going to deal with those. I'm going to work out. I'm going to change my dietary, intake. I'm going to change my exercise regimen. I'm going to make a plan, and I'm going to improve my health. I'm going to, drop some pounds. And in that way, once I encounter these other issues, I'm going to be in much better shape. So the sooner you can learn more from other men and their experiences, I think it's an incredible opportunity.
How important has it been to hear the stories of other men?
Oh, absolutely critical. I wouldn't have found my current care provider. I have care locally with a medical oncologist who's wonderful. I have care with a nationally known, probably internationally known specialist outside of the area who is very unique. He's very aggressive in his style. And I'm just so blessed to be under his care as well. I wouldn't have found that avenue had it not been for the discussions I had with not just one person, but several people on several monthly support group calls. I think, it's been absolutely imperative. And again, one of the things I tell a few individuals I know who say, well, I don't need a support group, and maybe they don't need one right now. And they're enthusiastic, and they're strong, and they're knowledgeable. And I say, but maybe that support group needs you. Maybe they need your positive attitude. Maybe they need your encouragement. It just need you to give them strength.
Oh, that's phenomenal perspective. Maybe that support group needs you. It's phenomenal. Speaking of perspective, Doctor, you sent me this quote, Doctor. How do you say his name? Tan To Shung?
without it in front of me, I can't remember. Tan Tao Chung, yeah. You know, he
Eh,
was a medical oncologist at Mayo, actually, who died very young age. But I loved his words having to do with cancer and the struggle with cancer and being positive and being a light for others.
he speaks of the cancer journey and says that journey need not be filled with angst, bitterness, why me questions, denial, age, depression, and even in some cases, an unrealistic pursuit of a long life. Can you say more about that quote? Because it seems so profound.
Well, I think it is. I think we all just want to say, okay, let's, I can lick this thing, or, some people feel that, hey, I don't deserve this. Why me? Um, I don't think we have a say in this in many cases. There are some chronic health issues, I'm sure, that contribute to, or some bad habits that, not taking care of yourself in certain ways that, add to the degree of uh, having a disease like this. But again, I think it's how you carry yourself. And that's kind of what he's saying, is that, you need to be strong and courageous. Um, you need to share with others. Here goes my emotions. I told you, Jason, last call, that my testosterone count went up from 6 to 7. On support group the other night, I was listening to guys that said, oh, mine went down from 800 to 480. I thought, boy, I'd love to have that problem. But I have far more estrogen in my system because of all of my chemo and my other 2 treatments I'm still undergoing, than testosterone. And so my kids laugh at me and kind of make fun of me, but they chuckle at, and that I'm much more sensitive. And yes, I do get a little choked up at times. But I think the doctor was right in that, it's, can you help others? Can you, set a good example? Can you be strong? And I think part of what I would like to do is that when I tried to get a support group help 4 or 5 years ago here in Sioux Falls area, I'm not going to say it was non-existent, but it was virtually non-existent. I think, I know that the leaders are trying, but there would be 4 or 5 men in a group. As you mentioned earlier, men don't like to talk about this stuff much. They don't like to talk about their inner feelings and their lifestyle changes, and they don't like to seek help. And there would be 4 or 5 men in a group, and I think there are many more men. I know probably 8 or 9 men that, since I moved back to Wisconsin 5 years ago, that have prostate cancer or have gone through quite a journey, and they still don't want to talk about it. And I don't poke or prod or question them. I just want a place where men can come who are referred and who feel welcome, and talk to others. And we have tremendous resources, and I have places I can direct them to out of state, or specialists that will give them incredible help.
Do you envision a live support group in Sioux Falls, or would it be via Zoom?
I think we could do either. There are pros and cons. There are people that live in Brookings, that have a hard time driving down, or Mitchell, or some of the areas. I think a hybrid combination works best these days. And that way you have some synergies of the group that's in the room. I certainly couldn't drive to Minneapolis once a month or twice a month to be involved in the groups that I have been and have gained so much from. So I'd like to do a hybrid program.
So, it sounds so needed. And I mean, if men are helped in this area of their life, that has to ripple out into other areas of their life too, I would imagine.
I think so. I really do. And part of the reason coming on today, like I shared with you, I don't feel like I'm a very good speaker, but my wife certainly could speak on an issue for an hour at the drop of a hat and be very articulate. But I appreciate, Jason, you giving me this opportunity to share, for other men. And I would welcome any calls, any emails. And again, as we're setting this up, and we're going to try to collaborate with some of the health professionals in this town already. And I've met with a few of them. And I think in time it would be a really effective, healthy group.
What would be the easiest way for someone to get a hold of you? Do you have a website?
We have to get the website up and running. We have to. I'm going to probably model it after some of the other websites for the other states involved in the National Alliance of State Prostate Cancer Coalitions. There are 46 states currently that have coalitions or chapters. We will be the 47th.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to get the nonprofit status done. So it'll be a few months, probably be March or April by the time we get things rolling. In the meantime, if anybody wants to reach out to me, my phone number is 714.
How about your email?
Yeah, my email is they can send me an email at olandmail, my last name, MAIL, olandmail at gmail.com.
olandmail@gmail.com. I just don't want to get you to give your phone number.
I see. That's okay.
And I ask all my guests this: what does imperfect best mean to you?
Imperfect best?
Yeah. To me, when I say I'm going for my imperfect best, it means I envision the best I want to create, and then as I go for it, mistakes will come up, obstacles will come up, but instead of using those as reasons to quit, I try to learn from those and move forward. What does doing your imperfect best mean to you?
I think most of my life has been a story of imperfect bests, because over the years I've become a much better insurance counselor by continually learning, going to annual classes. I think in this field of constantly changing dynamics, I think just trying to do our best, put our best foot forward together, be a good role model again, and then continually striving to find out more information, find better resources, technology. I mean, even for me, dealing with me the short time that I'm not the sharpest technology, knife in the drawer, and I need to improve on that area to be a good liaison, for instance. And so I think it's just a process of going through life, continually, giving it your best effort, but continuing to improve and search and find better ways to do things.
And you also believe in and getting help from your community, like even on the technical stuff, you were asking your community about different questions, right?
Yeah, and that's just it. It's so interesting. I met a lady who came to our insurance agency in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, 4 months before I was ever diagnosed with having prostate cancer. And this young lady, Sarah, her name is one of the best counselors in the country when it comes to men's health and sexual issues and incontinence, impotence, sexual function dysfunction. And she is so amazing in the way she presents and explains and helps people. And she came to our agency asking for professional liability for insurance coverage.
Oh
And
my gosh, another
yeah,
one of those
yeah.
things that just
And,
kind of fell into your life, huh?
and the young man that I have mentored for a few years called me in and said, Eivind, I can't talk about that older man stuff with Sarah. I mean, I can't understand what she's doing in her conferences and her meetings and her presentations and what she's suggesting to men and where there might be potential liabilities or risk, you know. And so can you come and meet with her at the same time? And I said, sure. Well, still today, she has been a tremendous source. And I wouldn't have never found these support groups had it not been for Sarah. I would have, when I was searching for a surgeon, when I was thinking about a different um, procedure to have done, and I was searching out a surgeon, she said, call so and so from Boston Scientific in Minneapolis because she's the one that provides the hardware or the device. And she can tell you that she stood over that surgeon's shoulder. And sure enough, I called her and she said, oh, yeah, I stood, I know he does 20 of these a year or whatever. I mean, she's been an invaluable resource. So it's just funny. But there are so many resources throughout the country. There's the UC system, University of California system is full of really good prostate cancer specialists. I have met several from out east, Johns Hopkins, all over. And yeah, a person can really become a student of, prostate cancer and research and what's cutting edge. But they have to start somewhere, and I'm hoping that I can help them tap into, however much they want to know or find out. I want to be able to tap them into those areas of expertise or those resources or those books. And then they can run with that.
Well, one of the things I noticed you like to talk about is servant leadership. And I have to say, I've been on this podcast, you're exemplifying what it is to be a servant leader, because who knows who will listen to this podcast over the years and a light bulb will go off, or they'll find a new path forward, more resources. Who knows? You're just giving. You're giving. You're being a leader for on the show. So thank you so much for doing that and for serving people neither of us may ever meet. Thanks.
Well, you're welcome. I think again, we're trying to serve a higher purpose. We're trying to empower. We're trying to help other individuals through collaboration, encouragement, directing, them to search and find their answers in the way they would like to do that. And so I guess I do appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for being on, my friend. Please stay on the line while I wrap up, okay?
Sounds good. Thanks, Jason.
It's been a few weeks since I recorded a podcast, and this was a really good one to get back on to get back to recording podcasts. I just so appreciate it that Eivind just lived such a neat life, and then when the obstacle of prostate cancer came, he didn't. I mean, that as he said, there's fear that sometimes there's challenges, but still he's moving forward, choosing an empowering perspective, getting resources, helping others. It's just very inspiring, and consider you do things in your own way for the people in your life that'll ripple out farther than you can see or imagine. So thanks for being you. And thanks for tuning in, whether you're watching this live or on replay. And please check in again next Wednesday for another awkwardly awesome podcast. Thanks for being you.